Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Driver Spotlight. In this episode, we speak with Roger Eagleton. We met Roger at the Grid Life event at Thunder Hill, where he was racing in the GLTC class and a spec E46. Hope you guys enjoy, and here we go.
Yeah, so Roger Eagleton, I've been racing since 2010. The professional side, I'm a real estate broker in California and Hawaii. I have a property management business. And really the founding of all of that and everything I do professional wise is really to support racing.
Yeah,
So it was kind of one of those things where I realized I didn't come from a family with a ton of money and nobody was going to give me a lot of money. So I had to figure out how to just work, my butt off basically. So everything I do professionally on the work side supports racing, and I've been fortunate. I've picked up sponsors along the way and a lot of support from a lot of people. But with racing, it's just always there's one level above the one that you're currently at, and it never ends. So it's a blessing and a curse. It's a blessing in that it's motivating if you're a business
yeah,
owner because you're like, man, I got to just really buckle down even harder, get more efficient, and figure out a way to scale. And it's a curse because you look back from where I started and I'm like, man, I've come pretty far, but there's always more. And it's like as long as you have that ambition to keep doing more and to keep improving, there's another level. And it's just, it's just one of those things. I guess maybe it's just life in
yeah,
general.
yeah. So what came first? Like, did you start racing? Have you been racing for a long time? Like, did you start racing before you started your business? Was it like the racing, as you said, kind of like you have your business and that drives the obviously supports the racing. But did you start racing before the business or the business before racing? Like time wise, how did this all play out for you?
So it was 2010, and I took a karting course up at Jim Russell. Well, it was called Jim Russell Racing at the time at Sonoma Raceway. Now it was Sim Raceway, and now it's Sonoma Raceway again. So I did like an arrive and drive karting season, and it was before I had my business. I think I might have still been in grad school for taxation at the time.
Okay.
So didn't really have like a ton of money, but the karting was an affordable entry point. And before that, I did a couple of track days, and I think that's what kind of got me hooked in the whole environment. I saw that what it was fun, definitely gets the adrenaline going. But just to race cars at that time didn't make sense, but the karting was relatively affordable. So did a
Hmm.
season of that. That was basically all I could do at the time. And then from there, I had to figure out how to start, a profession to make money. So really it was the racing first, and then it was trying to figure out how to support the racing.
Okay.
And that seems to be a common theme from the guys that I talked to at the racetrack.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I would completely agree. I mean, I ever since I started racing, I started working before I started racing, but then since I've discovered racing, a lot of what I do professionally is to drive and allow us to go racing. So yeah, totally. I don't have my own business. I'm not there yet at that phase, but potentially in the future, we could well, except for MyRaces.Live, I suppose.
Yeah,
That's more recent, to be honest. But that is true that could be something that would support the racing if everything goes well. So let's maybe that's the beginning of the business that supports the racing on my front.
I think there's something to it because that's why when I met you and Claire, it was really cool to hear somebody or a couple that kind of shared a passion on how to try to combine these two different things. So I think you're on the right track, and it's nice that you have support too because I was on my own. So it's nice that there's two of you that kind of can
Yeah,
push and pull and keep each other going. And it's nice that you both actually race because I think when you have a partner that doesn't really know what it is, they're like, are you going to be at the track again all weekend? Like, why are you going away? So to have that where you both have a common interest and then a desire to figure out a way to make it work, that's really important. So yeah, I think you guys have a really good product. And I think we're at the beginning stages of really launching into what could be a big thing with it because everybody wants content. Everybody's starved for content and
yeah,
live content, especially. And then not only live content, but live content that's actually like pretty wild when you think about it. Because we're taking, relatively fast machines and doing things that are relatively dangerous with them. And it's like
yeah,
people pay a lot of money for that. Look at the fight, the Tyson, the other guy he fought.
yeah.
Like, what was the record viewership on
That
that?
was
Because
ridiculous, right?
it's the unknown. Because people are like, what's going to happen? And if you
Yeah,
think about that, with every race, if it's a club level race, a pro level race, anything, it's like the unknown is the big factor of like what's going to actually happen here.
yeah,
We've seen some wild things happen at every race weekend I've been at, and at some point you become desensitized to it. But like, like I was at Lucky Dog, I think 2 weeks ago or maybe last week. There's cars rolling down the backstretch,
yeah.
and I was just like, wow, this is actually pretty wild when I sit down and like think about like what's going on, because most people would shy away from this, but we do this for fun. So if we can share that with people, I think it will really bring more people into the sport that maybe we're not aware of it. But when they see that, wow, there's crazy stuff that happens, like who would not tune in? I mean, everybody's just so starved for some kind of stimulation. And when you factor in the risk factor of this, like it's like a no-brainer. So I think, yeah, you guys have a really good entry point here into making this a much, much bigger product.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, thanks for the kind words. Yeah, the way I see it is like kind of like two things. Like a lot of people know racing, like they'll know F1 or NASCAR. Maybe IndyCar in the US is also quite big. The lower level stuff people don't obviously have visibility in, and but there is some exciting stuff that happens as well, right? Like if we look at the GLTC races that where we met a couple weeks ago, there was some like that's some close racing. Like that is some
Oh,
like
yeah.
legitimate, like real interesting, fun to watch. You don't know what's going to happen, like you said. Like there's some wheel to wheel racing. It was super fun to watch you and the rest of the guys race. So like even at the club level, or like kind of the more amateur level, there's some really interesting stuff going there, and I don't think that gets enough visibility. Like I think, like you said, it actually is interesting to watch. Like if you do watch it from someone's perspective, and some of the series do have broadcasts. Like I know Grid Life does a few events a year where they have a broadcast, and that stuff is like, you know, super fun to watch. So I totally agree that like there's some potential there for people to get more interest in motorsports in general just from watching some club level racing, and not necessarily have to get hooked on F1 or NASCAR or IndyCar.
You're right, and I honestly think the racing is better at the club level from what I've seen, because of the fact that there's money is not as much of a factor. It's still a factor, obviously,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
typically the rule set is designed to make it, relatively more affordable. The hard part is telling the story. So I think that's the thing that F1 with like their Drive to Survive and NASCAR, the other series
yes,
have done because they have the funding, is they've been able to tell the story like, like Hollywood does. So if combined with the live streaming, if you can get some people to help tell their side of the story, explain how they got there, what they're doing, what the goal is, and build the drama, that's what people want, is drama. I mean, it's every reality television show on there, every Instagram page that gets a lot of followers,
yeah,
it's drama, and that's what we do every weekend. But we just have to figure out at these levels, like how do you express that? So maybe, in addition to the live stream in the car, follow the drivers around for the weekend and see what it's actually like, because there's always drama. And that's the thing. It's like when I invite friends to an actual race weekend, they're like, wow, this is way more exciting than
yeah.
just watching it on TV, because you don't have the backstory. So it's just like figuring out how to get people involved in that backstory. And then once they do, they're hooked. But, again, it's like sharing that with the masses. And I think that's where your tool comes in, is that you're giving a product that most people can afford to run and they can easily set up without being a tech wizard, and plug and play, and then share the drama of the weekend. And again, I think that's like, we're at an exciting point, because hopefully this is like, Bitcoin in 2010 or something, where everybody's like just kind of getting the beginning of it. Like, should I get a live stream camera? Should I not do it? I think another 10 years, everybody will have a live stream camera. And really, if the clubs and different organizations are smart, they're going to require it, because why not have
Yeah.
content from 20 cars per race group coming in, and you can just pump it out into your social media channels? I mean, that's really what we're missing. And I think that's what advertisers and sponsors really want to see. And that's why they tend to flock towards F1, obviously, because there's a return, you have eyeballs. So this is kind of the missing piece. And you're right. It's just, we do an exciting thing. It's just, we have to get it out there. And this is hopefully the easy way to get it out there.
Yeah, and I hope that like from a racer's perspective, as a whether it be a driver, the driver themselves, or the team, or someone within the team that's helping out, can be take on the role of telling their story, and telling their story about the drama. Because the thing there is, of course, like you said, like the Drive to Survive, they have the money, the production, they're telling the whole story. People have social media nowadays, and so like to tell the story, to make it interesting, it almost you have to have the drivers or the series at a minimum be kind of invested in their own storytelling, and they have to tell the story about why is it interesting to watch, Roger as a driver in Grid Life. Like what makes that interesting? What is the story that you want to tell? So whether it be short clips through the weekend where you're coming on and just kind of like describing how things are going, how did quality go? Oh, whatever, the tires weren't great, I had an incident, I spun here, like telling the story about what happened, and then you augment that with, and you can follow along live in an hour, I'll be racing. I think from a race weekend perspective and the people following on social media, it can make a pretty attractive story opportunity, I think, for people.
Oh yeah, 100%. Because I think people forget that at the end of the day, all of this is a product, and everybody, and this is the same for every business. So you've got to figure out how to promote yourself. You have to explain to people why they should pick your product over the millions of other things that are out there. But again, we have a super sexy product at the end of the day, because like every, little boy and tons of little girls want to drive race cars and do
Yeah.
racing. So we're not like selling, chess tournaments or competitive book reading. Like this is actually pretty cool stuff. It's just like you said, we've got to tell the story better. And I think whoever cracks this, egg first is really going to be the leader of it. And again, hopefully that's you guys, because I think again with your product, it's so easy to use and the setup is pretty. You don't have to have any tech background. It's very plug and play. Yeah, the drivers maybe can get on right before they go out to the race, explain what they're doing, and then just have the series start to pick this up. Because every series that I've worked with is struggling for building viewership and building content,
Yeah.
and you have the little entry point to that content. So yeah, you're right. We just need to do a better job all around of promoting what we're doing every weekend.
Yeah. Okay, let's get back to some of your stuff. So you did karting. That's what kind of got you going with some lapping. How did you go from lapping, karting to now? The last I spoke to you, you were kind of committed into this Mustang and the NASA. Like, how do you bridge that gap? How does it go from karting to lapping to now you're racing in spec Mustangs?
So I mean, from the karting, I took I think a year or two off to kind of, raise some funds, get the business
Yep.
going. My entry point was jumping into SCCA, which is primarily the club that I race with. So for people that don't know, it's Sports Car Club of America. One of the oldest and original, I would say, racing groups in America, and actually was the group that hosted F1 back in the day, hosted Trans Am. It was really the beginning of organized racing, both professional and club level racing. And what's happened is that through the years, it's kind of become diluted. So you have other groups that are now out there, stealing eyeballs. And again, it's not a bad thing. This is just what happens in life and
Yep.
business.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So started with them, racing a spec E30, and was able to cobble together a full season, won a championship in that. So again, that
Oh
kind of
wow.
just
Yeah.
got me more hooked into the thing of like, oh, I'm halfway decent at this. I want to do it more. So from SCCA club level stuff, let's see, I did the season in Spec E30. Again, I think I had to take a few years off to kind of raise some more funds. I started doing some endurance racing with NASA, and I was lucky enough to jump on a couple teams where we won the 25 Hours of Thunderhill, which was a really big, super cool club level endurance event.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's a 25-hour race held at Thunderhill Raceway. So there's no breaks. It's not like you race for an hour and take a break. It's literally 25 hours, nonstop. And at the time, it was the longest race in the world. So I started in that in a little Mazda Miata in like the E3 class, which was like the slower of all the classes. But
Yeah.
we did pretty well. And I think out of maybe 6 times running it, I've won it twice in the E3 class. So again, like being very strategic with like picking the teams and figuring out where I have the best chance at getting a good result has led me to other things. Because from there, I jumped into US Touring Car, which is a series that runs underneath NASA.
Yeah.
I think in that one, I was running a BMW. I picked up another championship in that, and again, it just kind of keeps the fire going. From there, I jumped into a series called Exotic. It was called EXR. It was like Exotic Race Series with these
Okay.
guys out of Las Vegas. That was a super cool thing. They ran that for a couple of seasons. It was a really cool French car. It was a Miget. It's like a little two-frame chassis, no traction control, no ABS, a little I think it's like a little French or maybe like a Nissan motor, like a little
Okay.
6-cylinder paddle shift. So super fun car, like 1,800 pounds with about 230 horsepower, but you really
Hmm.
had to wheel the car. And through that and being somewhat successful in that, picking up a few wins, I was able to actually pick up a ride in a IMSA, a GT4 car. So
Really? Oh, that's
again, it's
awesome.
just, yeah, so it's just been like one thing after another. And, in between there, trying to do full seasons at the club level. But it's just like trying to really put the pieces together. So that's the thing. There's no clear path with this.
Yeah.
Even if you have an unlimited budget, there's still no clear path, because all of a sudden everybody's like, oh, here, come race over here, come race over here. But as a driver, you have to figure out, okay, well, where do I want to go? And for me, I mean, I'd love to win like the 24 hours of Le Mans, 24 hours of Spa.
Yeah.
I'd like to do 24 hours of Daytona. So those are my goals, and I'm still trying to work towards those. And realistically, I still have time to do those. It's just a matter of figuring out how to do it with the funding that I have and with sponsorship at the level that I can afford to do it. But there's really, I guess the thing is, there's no clear path with it. So it's just like
Yeah.
figuring out how to be successful in whatever you're racing at the time, with the goal of like, okay, use this as a stepping stone to the next thing. And yeah, so right now what I've been racing a lot of is Spec Mustang, which is a series that was started by the founder of Hooked on Driving, this guy David Ray. Started back in 2014, I want to say.
Okay.
Runs underneath SCCA, so it's like a club level class. 2005 through 2009 Ford Mustang GT. We turn them into race cars. We strip them out, put roll cages in them. We put a Cortex coilover full suspension kit around the car. We run 295, typically Toyo or Hoosier, DOT race tires, big
Yeah.
brakes on the front of the car. And the cars are really quick. I mean, they lap as quick, if not quicker than some really high performance street cars out there, and at a cost of around 35 to 45,000 to build a car.
Okay.
So and they're safe cars too. That's the other big part of it. So that's where I've kind of ended up right now. And again, it's a fun thing because it's relatively affordable, and it's pretty competitive because all the cars are spec, and it allows you to race in different series. So you did mention NASA. We actually can race these cars in NASA under their spec iron rules. And
Okay.
not only that, we can race the cars in, what else have we raced them in? We've raced them in Trans Am. We won a championship in Trans Am in the GT class with that car too. So we've actually raced them in a lot of different series. So I think as a driver, that's the other part, is trying to figure out what platform can you find that you can race in multiple series, because you just really want to expand your reach and try to like shoot your shot wherever you can, and,
Yeah.
and get
Yeah.
in front of as many people as possible. So it's been a solid platform for that.
Yeah.
And again, even if you end up writing off a car, which we've done, which is that happens in racing, it's not going to feel the pain of like writing off a GT4 or GT3
Absolutely.
car,
Yeah.
which is $200,000 or $300,000. You're writing off a car that you can find on Craigslist and build into a race car again if you have to, and maybe use some of the parts from the broken car. So it's just one of these things where I think it's a good, affordable entry point for
Yeah.
drivers, and leaves a lot of room on the table for development as well. So I've been really happy with it, and I would definitely recommend it if somebody was looking at, what series do I want to race in. Miatas are obviously, like, there's a ton of them out of there. They're You have to be quick to be competitive. I
Mhm.
just personally, after seeing a lot of accidents with them, I'm not sold on the safety aspect of them. I know
Okay.
they are safe cars, but they are small cars at the end of the day. And I
Yeah.
just drove one, 2 weeks ago at Lucky Dog at Thunderhill for 4 hours. And I think that was my last time driving a Miata. I'm like, okay, this has been fun, but I kind of
It's not for
like
you.
this. It's not for me anymore. I've done so many hours in a Miata. It's
Yeah.
just, and again, there's nothing wrong with it. I just have decided, like, okay, I want a little bit more around me, and I'm
Yeah.
happy with the bigger style cars. And there's no loss in performance. It's, if anything, it's a little bit more difficult because you have more weight to manage.
Mhm.
And I think the fun factor is even increased because you've got a big V8 behind you. So I just personally, I think that Spec Mustang fills a very important void at the club racing level. And even again, if you race it in Trans Am at the pro racing level, there's a lot of opportunity for you to take a car that doesn't break the bank and go out there and have fun
Yeah.
every weekend in different series.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's true. I just want to unpack a couple things there that you brought up. So one is like when you start going back to jumping back to where you started, you did some Spec E30, and then you went through your story there. Um, is a lot of that an arrive and drive program versus you buying the car / running a team? Like, where, at what point did you decide that you wanted to do arrive and drive versus buying a car? Because I think the Mustang, we spoke, I think you do own the Mustang, my understanding.
Yeah.
And the background to that question a little bit is that I'm actually going through that myself. So I've done a lot of different types of racing, endurance racing, club racing, all very kind of entry level stuff. Most of it has been arrive and drive. I do own a car, but it's not physically near me. I'm looking at series to join. That's why we also spoke about the Spec Mustang together a few weeks ago. But and I keep going back and forth between getting my race car down to California and then trying to run it myself here, or even having a couple of guys help out, versus finding an Arrive and Drive program somewhere. So first of all, maybe did you start off with Arrive and Drive and go to your own car? And what do you see the pros and cons of either? And what would you recommend to someone getting started into racing, whether they should find the funds for Arrive and Drive versus buying all the stuff and trying to get a team off the ground themselves, or buying a car?
Yeah, I mean, I think pretty early on I figured out that I could either run a business and Arrive and Drive race, or I
Yep.
could try to build a race car and maintain it myself, and then like maybe work a normal job. I couldn't do both. I just There are people that do it, and I have a lot of respect for them, and that was definitely the model for many years. I just don't think that it's as realistic these days because there are more shops that are specialized in what they do. The cost to actually just arrive and drive has come down to the point, if you do it right, to where it's actually more cost effective to do arrive and drive,
Mm-hmm.
because especially in California, like we're in a high cost of living area, it's I mean, it's insane to have a house with space in California that you can even work on a car. And assuming your HOA doesn't, go crazy that you're working on your race car, if you have an
Yep.
HOA, and if you do have a big enough plot of land with a garage, well, like typically that means that's pretty expensive. So you don't really have the funds for the race car. So I talk to people every day that have this scenario that are like, well, I bought this big house, I have a shop, but now I can't afford to race my car because the
Yeah,
property taxes and
exactly.
insurance are insane. So I kind of think that early on, in your racing path, I would probably advise Arrive and Drive and just really
Mm-hmm.
start to shop the different makes and models you want to drive, the different series. I do think it's more cost effective, and I know, people will probably say, well, it's easy for you to say, but I think if you break the numbers down and really do an analysis of it, and then factor in what your time is worth, like, because you have to
Yes.
factor in, like, you still need to sleep, you still need to support a family, you have to have some
Mm-hmm.
sanity. Typically, I think Arrive and Drive is the way to go, and if you partner with a good shop, I mean, I've been very fortunate. I've been partnered with Dig Motorsports for since like 2017, so I kind of helped them get launched. So timing wise, we were really working well together, and we still have been working well together. So if you can find a shop that maybe is early on in their development that is willing to kind of help you a little bit with the cost too, that's something that's really important. And there are shops that are out there for sure, because there are plenty of people that like to just work on race cars and build race cars and support race cars,
Yeah,
but they don't
that's their
actually
passion,
know how to
right?
race.
Like, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
So I think that's where we're going in general with racing is find a shop like that you click with and the people you like, and figure out a way to make it work for both of you to where they can have a sustainable business model and you can have a sustainable career doing this. Because I just think that it's very difficult to do both, and more
yeah,
power to you if you do both. But I don't see I don't see that very much anymore, and I think it's really kind of going away.
yeah. That's fair. That's fair. So that's a good answer. So I mean, I'm going through a decision myself, is trying to figure out like how do I, well, first of all, I'm trying to figure out what series I want to race in next year. So I'm looking, Grid Life looked like it was a pretty fun race. I've looked like at Spec 46, Spec 30. Like I said, I have my own race car. It's it's in Canada in the east coast, so it's far away from here. But there's an opportunity to bring that car down and maybe to do some NASA, SD5. So I'm kind of looking at all these options right now. So, and I think it's like an interesting topic is how people fund their racing, and then how they go about deciding whether they should try and run a car or not. So yeah, that's some good insight. The next thing I wanted to ask you about was, what is it that makes racing interesting for you? And I'll give you a bit of background again on the sort of answer that I would have for that is, I obviously I wouldn't consider myself a huge adrenaline junkie. I obviously do like it because I wouldn't be racing otherwise, because that's a large part of the fun. But for me, racing is like a big getaway from my professional life, where like going to the racetrack on the weekend is one of the few places and one of the few activities I can do where I will completely disconnect from work entirely. Like the moment I get to the racetrack on the Thursday or Friday to the moment I leave on the Sunday, there's not a thought that goes towards my professional life and the stresses that come along with that. So I want to get your insight. What is it about racing? Is it purely the adrenaline and you're like an adrenaline junkie chasing that next hit, or do you also have some sort of like me where it's a disconnect? Like where do you get your interest in racing from?
I mean, I think I've heard it said before that it's cheaper than therapy, and I think that that's
Yeah.
that's a good analysis of it, because Yeah, like you said, it's a good chance to disconnect, because if you do it well, you have to be 100% focused on what you're doing. And when you're driving the car, obviously, you're not texting, you're not talking on the phone, you're not strategizing about, your business or your next career move. And if you are, you have to kind of reevaluate what you're doing at the moment.
Yeah.
So
Hmm.
I need it basically because I've tried, I moved to Hawaii for a couple of years because I was kind of just getting burnt out of business. And I think even racing, I was getting a little bit burnt out because I think I was getting in so deep. I was like, oh man, where does this go? So I was like, okay, I'm going to go to Hawaii, nice tropical beaches, relaxed lifestyle. And honestly, I was pretty miserable because I was not racing as much. And I
Yeah.
think that if you have a certain personality, you need some kind of outlet. And it's hard because, like we're sitting in front of computers for, 12 hours a day now. Even
Hmm.
if you do have a job that requires you to be out of the office for a bit, you're still in front of the computer. I don't know that we were made to really live like this. And I think by doing racing, even if it's a weekend a month, you're engaging all of your senses, you're getting physical activity. I mean, I work out every day, but it's not the same as like
Yeah.
being strapped in the car wheel to wheel and having things that are unexpected happen. I mean, I like the adrenaline, but I also, it's calming in a weird way. Like at the end of like a 2-hour stint for an endurance race, like I'm the most calm and at peace that I probably ever am. And I'm like, oh, I really appreciate, coming home, and I really appreciate like my girlfriend more, and I appreciate
Yeah.
like just life in general. But that's what it takes me, is it takes me like just having that adrenaline burned out of my system via surviving for 2 hours to be like, okay, cool, I'm at peace now. And
Yeah.
like I don't know if I'll always be like that, but that's how I am now. And when I talk to guys that are still in their 70s racing, like a lot of them are just like that too. So I think if you're wired a certain way and you're attracted to racing, that's just what it is. And this is what we like and what we're attracted to. I mean, if I could get the same experience golfing or, I mean, reading or anything, like I would probably follow it. But so far I haven't found it. And I've tried like everything. I've tried golfing. I mean, the only thing that comes close to racing so far has been foiling, like, either in the ocean or behind a boat on the lake. That's
Yeah.
like a hydrofoil that you're flying. It's cool. It's fun. It definitely involves a lot of your senses. There's definitely some risk factor because the foils are sharp and can hurt you, but it's still not the same as like, figuring out how to get a perfect lap and just nailing like that perfect qualifying time, or just, passing a ton of people. It doesn't have that same reward.
Yeah.
So I think if you're wired like us, that sadly, this is it. And I will say sim racing is coming a long way, and I can get some of the same benefits through sim racing if you have a good rig and you've got, VR headset,
Yeah.
and you take it seriously. I can definitely get some of the same benefits, but it's not the same because you're at your home, or you're at the office. You don't have that forced disconnect like you were talking
Yeah.
about, where you're at the racetrack, you smell the race fuel,
Yeah.
other people are involved in it. Like, it's once you take the headset off, you're back in your life, and you're just
Yeah,
like,
I feel like VR is like a like short term, right? So it's like
yeah,
it'll get me to disconnect for the short amount of time that I'm on the sim, and that may be like an hour, 2 hour long session if I'm doing something a bit more involved. But yeah, I think the sim racing is getting there, but like you said, it's not. I mean, it's just not. Yeah, it's not the full weekend. Like I can disconnect, but I'm not gonna
yeah,
disconnect. It's like it's I wouldn't say it's like watching a TV show, but it's kind of from like a time perspective. It's kind of that same commitment level where I'll put myself behind the wheel for like an hour or two on the sim, and during that time I'm disconnected, but not the same as a weekend where it's like start to finish. I'm completely disconnected from anything that's happening in quote unquote real life, and
yeah.
at the racetrack. Yeah.
Exactly.
So
And it's a good tool to keep fresh, I think. But yeah, it's
absolutely.
never going to replace the actual experience of being there, even on the worst days. Like, we were just testing our spec Mustang. We blew up the motor yesterday. But honestly, I was like, okay, well, you know what? I was at the racetrack. It beats sitting at home, like catching up on work or emails, and like, yeah, it sucks, but that's part of the deal. Is like, this is life, and it adds a kind of an interesting story because you go to a dinner party that same night and people are like, oh, what did you do today? And they're like, oh, we went for a walk and we went Christmas shopping. And they're like, oh, what did you do? And I'm like, oh, well, we are driving, testing some new tires, and the car blew up, and I thought it was going to catch on fire, but it was all good. And they're just like,
What?
what did you
Yeah.
do? Like, how
Yeah.
are you not like frantic right now? I'm like, well, this is what happens. Like, it's part of the deal. So yeah, I don't think anything's going to replace that. And I think one of the hard things though that we have to be cognizant of, though, and I as I'm getting older, I realize this, is there are so many competing places for us to go race, so many different
Hmm.
clubs and venues. I think at some point we're going to have to, like, as a group, figure out like, okay, we can really spread ourselves thin, or we can kind of come together and be like, okay, guys, like, let's have a bunch of cars together in a consolidated group where everybody can figure out where their car fits. Otherwise, you're going to end up with like 2 or 3 cars per class in a race
Hmm.
event that's not really fun. So part of that is like, and you mentioned it was like you're trying to pick a series to run in. There are so many series that it's very difficult. And I feel like that's also going to lead to some problems down the road as we get too diluted.
Yeah.
But that's a thing to, after you've raced for maybe 10 years, to kind of like look at how you can give back by maybe picking a club and like running with it and sticking with it and helping the club grow. And I've started to really enjoy that. So I served on the board of directors for my local SCCA club a couple of years ago, and I
Hmm.
still do what I can in the background. And I like that, and I could see myself doing more of that when I stop racing, if I ever stop racing. But I think that's important just to kind of bring up, is that there's a lot of competition out there, and we do have to kind of be aware of like, hey, let's not spread this too thin. Like, let's try to keep this whole sport alive by keeping it entertaining, and making sure everybody can do this even when we're done with it, so that there's still a path to go have fun with cars.
Yeah, agreed. And so what makes a good racing series, or maybe even broader, what makes a good club to join in from your perspective? Because I think like I've experienced now Grid Life a couple times. I've never driven with Grid Life, so I've only been there as a spectator twice, and I really enjoyed the vibe. So like the it's got kind of that tuner vibe. Like if you're into like building cars and like you like playing with cars, it's got that vibe. But the whole GLTC series also kind of brings the racing into it. So like the whole weekend, I thought it was very cool. I've also done things like I've done a lot of like Champ Car, more endurance stuff, and more recently, since I've moved to California, I have some friends who do Lemons, which is kind of like the most entry level, and that vibe is completely different. It's like, yes, we're racing cars, but it's almost like a big party in the weekend and in the paddock. So what is it for you that makes for a good race series that you personally would be attracted to?
I think, I mean, so I've been fortunate to be around, I mean, pretty much every series so far that's out there. And I think that the reason so far I've been gravitating towards SCCA is that it's still the most professionally run club level series that you can do, in terms
Okay.
of,
Yeah.
it's a little bit more strict, I'd say, because they do have very, very strict and clear classing and rules and regulations, and there's definitely a lot of bureaucracy with it. But that's what real racing is. Like, if you look at IMSA with all the BOP stuff, and
Yeah.
you look at F1 with all the rules and regulations, that's part of the deal, is like the intellectual side of like, okay, this is what the rules say. What do I have to do to make my car competitive? And what is my
Yeah.
competitor doing if he's faster than me? Like, what are they doing? How are they finding a loophole? So for me, I tend to like SCCA just because they take it very seriously, the stewards that are involved in it and the organization at a national level. NASA does a really good job as well. But I do think that the people that are coming up, like Grid Life, WRL, Champ Car, they're also taking people. But I will say that their requirements to join are also a little bit less stringent. So you don't have to have a
Hmm.
race license with some of these groups, which is good and bad. It's good in the sense that you can get out there and just have fun with it. But like last week, and I saw some really sketchy stuff happen
Yeah.
that
Absolutely. Yeah.
probably wouldn't have happened if everybody had been a licensed driver. And
Hmm.
SCCA's race school is only 3 days, so it's not like it's a huge commitment. And you could
Hmm.
use, you can rent a race car if you have one, you can use it. So it's not a huge commitment, but there is some kind of just general barrier to entry, which I think is important. And I know NASA has their ladder system with HPDE before they sign you off.
Hmm.
So I think safety wise, there's something to be said for that. Like, you do want to be on track with people that have somewhat of a baseline understanding of what the rules are, and
Yep.
how to keep everybody safe, because it's not fun to write off race cars. And it happens, I mean, it happens everywhere. It happens probably more at the pro level now than anywhere else. But, and that's not a great example of for people to watch. But
Yeah.
I think, it also happens really a lot of these kind of at the amateur level too. So for me personally, it was just having something with structure that was enforced. And I've been on the wrong side of the enforcement too. I definitely have had, my license, well, not suspended, but I've been on probation in the
Yeah.
early days because I was a little bit too aggressive. But again, it was cool because I learned, now I know that, okay, if we're having an event, I need to just recognize that everybody wants to go home at the end of the day with their cars in one
Yes.
piece. And maybe
Yes.
that pass that you think you can pull off, maybe really just wait, a fraction of a second and make sure you can really do it before you do it. So the punishment has been a good thing for me, and it's
Yeah.
made me a better driver. And I feel like I'm relatively clean, I'm relatively safe, but it's partly because I got in trouble. I got my wrist slap early on in the
Hmm.
game, and I like that. So again, it's whatever club I think you vibe with, and where your friends are at, and also what's in your area, because not all these clubs are in different areas. But in
Yeah, of
California,
course.
we're definitely lucky. We've got SCCA, we have NASA, we have Lucky Dog, we have Champ Car, we have Lemons. So I'd say race in the most serious series that your budget will allow if
Yes.
you want to possibly race at a pro level in the future, just because that's part of the deal, is that that structure and those rules and regulations are what you're going to have to deal with. And if you don't, if you just want to go have fun, then I would say do Lemons all day long. Like
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
more of
yeah.
a party, like you said. But if you think that like, hey, I might want to like, I might IPO with my company, or I might get some crazy stock options, and I might have the option to go racing at a high level, I would lean more towards the more structured series, because that's going to be a really good entry point to see how it's done at the highest levels. So that you're not shocked of like, well, why can't I just give that car a 15 lap penalty because they're faster? Like that's not how it
Yeah,
works. Like
that's not how it works. Yeah, yeah.
no, you gotta lobby. There's politics behind the scenes. But for me, like I think I like it, and it's just again wherever you personally kind of vibe with the people in the group is what I would say. But again, the most serious group that you can find if you want to try to go pro down the road.
Pro, yeah, yeah, do something. Okay, one last question before we wrap up for you is, you mentioned that you kind of having these ambitions and goals to do IMSA. Well, I guess you have done IMSA. You said a GT4, but you have ambitions maybe to get back into it. Oh no, sorry, Le Mans. You were talking about Le Mans and the endurance racing out in Europe, and potentially the 24 hours Daytona, which I guess that would be with IMSA. But the driver to get there for you, is that like the competition itself, like you want to measure yourself against some of the kind of up echelon of gentleman drivers slash pros, or is it the fact you get to drive these really cool race cars? Is it like the flash of the weekend, or is it more these historic, very famous historic races? Like 24 hours Daytona is a big one in the United States. Le Mans is obviously huge. The Nürburgring 24 hours, I mean, these are classics, right? So like maybe it's all of it, but what is the kind of your big motivator for trying to get it to that level of racing?
I think, I mean, it's all of that. It's the history of it, because growing up as like a kid, you this is what you hear of. You see the posters of like 24 Hours of Daytona, of Spa, Le Mans, Nürburgring. The cars, obviously, because that's pretty much the most cutting edge cars you can get in
Hmm.
any class, GT4, GT3, or the prototype classes. Like probably a little bit too old for the prototype classes, but I mean that would be just a dream come true for sure. The competition, I think you'd be surprised, because at the end of the day, it's more, sadly, it's not necessarily because the people that are there are blazingly fast. It's typically because they figured out how to put together the funding to get there.
Yes,
And I
agreed.
think that's the thing about the sport that people don't realize. It's like this is not like, the NBA or the NFL, where you have to get like scouted from like high school or whatever, and then you get drafted and all that. This is different. Like as long as you have a decent level of talent and you're semi-responsible, if you can figure out how to get the funding together, either your own funding or sponsorship or combination of the two, you can find a ride, you can find a seat. And I think that that's very democratic. Like it's because it's open to anybody. I mean, you have to pay to do it, but
Hmm.
that's the name of the game. And if you look at F1, I mean, half or three-quarters of the field is paying to be there.
Yes,
So there's
absolutely.
no difference in it. So it's just like, I guess anything in life, if it's good, it's usually not free. It's usually expensive.
Yeah.
So I think part of the challenge is just to get there again and be like, hey, I figured out how to do all the stuff on the back end just to be able to sit in the seat and drive and have and hopefully compete for a win. So I think it's just more of a personal challenge. It's just like, how do you do it without, breaking the bank and sacrificing everything? And the nice thing is, I know plenty of people that have done it, so it's possible. And even I think the big thing is you have to have the understanding that it is possible.
Hmm.
And I think too many people just think like, oh, I could never be there. You'd be surprised. Like you just have to figure out how to put the pieces together. And I have a lot of friends that have done it. So the model exists. You can do it. You just have to figure out how to do it. And it's not easy. That's the thing. Nobody's gonna find you to track day and be like, oh, come drive with me like at the 24 hours of Daytona. You're gonna have to bring something to the table, and that's talent and some funding. But it's accessible if you can do it.
Yeah, that's one thing that actually I really like what you said there, because that's one thing that a lot of people don't think of, and that we probably should do a better job as a kind of community in the racing world to educate people on, and it is like how to get funding, how to potentially think about your career choices to kind of guide you and allow you to achieve those goals. Because a lot of what you see is, or the public sees, is they think these, like you said, F1 drivers are the best drivers in the world, which to be fair they are, but they're also paying to be there. There's probably better drivers below the lower level series that aren't racing because they don't have the funding, right? And so I feel like funding is like such a huge part of the hobby. It's such a huge part of what we do, and yet we don't really spend that much time talking about it outside of maybe admiring those who have done it, who are, succeeding, who have put the foundation in place in their personal careers or businesses to enable them to get to that level. And I think that maybe and maybe it's just me, maybe I've just missed it in kind of my experience racing, but I've never gone to a race school where someone has done even an hour or 30 minutes session on funding, on what does it take to actually get to the IMSA level in terms of money, whether it be finding the sponsors, whether it be building your own business, whether it be driving your career choices towards something that will enable you to do it. Like I don't find that to be a topic that's brought up in race schools, yet it's probably like the biggest topic. Like if, like you said, if you have the funding in place and you've built your racing career in such a way that you have the skills, you'll be able to race at these series, right? So so I think that's an interesting topic, and I think that I don't think anybody from racing schools will listen to this, but I feel like if someone were to be running racing schools and to listen to this, they probably should put some time into the financials of racing and how to get to that level.
But I mean, they should, and I think part of the reason they don't, though, is because they are selling a dream. I think, and again, I
Yes.
get it. They're businesses. They're selling a dream of like, hey, mom and dad, put your kid through the racing school for, 5 or 10 grand or whatever it costs. And if they're really good, they're going to get picked up by this team and they're going to be a pro
Yeah.
racer. And like the reality is that's not going to happen. I mean, I'll just tell you that flat out. The reality is mom and dad are going to still have to pay for it if they want to
Yes.
go move up the ranks. So I get it from a business perspective, but I do think that it could be a whole series of like, how do you put together the funding? And honestly, the people that I've seen put together the funding the best have been the female racers with the
Mm-hmm.
social media area.
Yeah.
I mean, just so many of them have been very successful with figuring out how to get eyeballs, how to get funding from sponsors, and then move up the ranks. And it's like, as guys, I think we kind of are hard headed. We're like, oh, they're just girls. They're that's why they get funding. They're still working really hard. And
Absolutely.
honestly, like those would be good people to interview and be like, hey, tell us the real like nuts and bolts of how this works, because they are making it work. And I think they're making it work better than many guys, just because they're probably putting in more effort onto what actually pays off, which is cubic dollars at this point. And obviously they're talented too. I'm not discounting that, but talent will only get you so far in racing. But I think
Yeah.
that's life too. I mean, the best, there's businesses out there that are great, but they don't have any funding, so they're never going to get off the ground.
Yeah.
You work in Silicon Valley, like you see it. There's businesses that are super well funded. They're maybe not the greatest product, but they have the funding behind them, so they're out there out front. So racing is no different than anything else in life. You just have to figure out how to get the funding to make it happen, and you do have to have the talent, but the funding is a big part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, I think we're going to wrap it up. I usually give you an opportunity to call out any sponsors, anybody you want to thank for where you are today, and maybe how to it will help you get to your dreams of doing spa and Le Mans. But go ahead and you got the floor for any shoutouts.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. I mean, Five Star Property Management, that's my management company. We manage over 200 single family homes in the Bay Area. So, we really take our philosophy of doing well at the racetrack and apply that to how we manage properties for owners. Most of these owners are basically people that inherited a property or maybe moved because of a job and they didn't expect to be landlords. So we have to step in, help guide them through the process, make sure they have income coming in every month. It's a really rewarding job for us because we are one of the only people really in the world that give people money every month. Mortgage companies are taking your money, insurance
Yeah.
companies are taking your money. We're turning around, putting great tenants in the properties and paying people every month consistently year after year. So it's kind of cool. Like, hey, we get to be the candy man and bring you candy every
Yeah.
month if we do our job well. Digger Motorsports as well. They're based at Thunderhill Raceway. Jeremy and Candice Cuthbertson, husband and wife owners. They've been really instrumental in supporting my career. I've run again with SCCA with them, Trans Am, picked up a championship with them, and we still have more to do for sure. So and anybody else out there that is interested in maybe partnering along the way, again, it's hard to get maybe like a solid return, but if somebody has a passion for racing and they want to be around it, I think that's where the good partnership comes from, is that somebody that maybe never got the opportunity to get into it while they could, but they still have the desire to be around it, and they can bring some funding to the table. We can definitely get your foot in the door. I will say hospitality at IMSA level and other events is very, very, very nice. So, it's a great team building experience. It's a great just personal experience. And if you want to get behind the scenes of any of these events, the best way to do it is with a driver and seeing your company name on the side of that car. So there's a lot of opportunities out there for sure. And also want to thank you guys for doing this and for your product too, because again, I think it's a great product. Hopefully we will work together for many years, and hopefully
Yeah.
this will take off, because I do think it's honestly the missing piece with how easy you've made it to use for the end user. And the end result is that we're putting content out there. So, we just want more people to get it in their cars, and maybe get a couple series to mandate its use, which would be awesome.
Yeah.
And again, that's like the politics of it. So if you get a series to mandate its use, like there may be pushback at the beginning, but I can't see any downside of saying, hey, if you come race with us, you have to live stream your race, which means you have guaranteed eyeballs on this. So here, put your company name in front of the camera, and with your platform, you can, rotate sponsors through. So it's super easy. So I think that you're onto something really big, and I want to see you guys continue to grow.
Awesome, man. Thank you very much. Really appreciate those kind words. Yeah. Okay, we'll wrap it up there. Thank you very much, Roger. Hopefully this was a bit of a longer episode, but I think there's some awesome content there. So thanks for coming on, and we'll probably see you at the racetrack soon.
Cool. Sounds good. Thank you.
Thanks.